Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast with your postnatal expert, Peter Lap. Now, as always, will be me. This is the podcast for the 5th of October 2025. And today, as in the day before music means I have a guest on, right? It's all guest interviews these days. I'll promise I'll do another Q&A. What is it? Not next week, but the week after. But today, I have the pleasure, the absolute joy of talking to Katherine Sellery from the Conscious Parenting Revolution. We are talking intentional parenting. Oh yes, it's another one of those episodes where I know we've done tons of parenting episodes, but I think these things are important, and I would say that as someone who was raised a certain way with a certain style of parenting. There has to be a better way out there, and therefore I am delighted to bring Katherine, who's an absolute machine in for all this type of stuff. She's been working at this for the best part of 2 decades and all that sort of stuff. She's done TEDx and she's worked with basically parents for absolute donkeys. How to get through to your kids in a way that works. How to raise your kids in a way that works, that doesn't frustrate the hell out of you or indeed your children. So, again, I love this subject, especially when it comes to someone, when I get the chance to listen to someone like Katherine. So without further ado, here we go. What is intentional parenting?
Yeah, I love the question. And, when I think about my own journey as a parent, I have 2 kids, and they're grown. My son's 30, our daughter is 26. And they're, at different places on their journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
But my parenting hasn't stopped, right? It's just changes as your kids get older, but
Sure.
you're always mom, or you're always dad. I mean, you still play that really important role. And what I guess intentional parenting is about is that along the way, we don't slip into our unconscious and just start doing some things that are damaging the relationship. Mm-hmm. So when we're intentional, we have the capacity. I started a conscious parenting revolution so that people could be intentional. Yeah. And the consciousness aspect of that is that when I'm having relationships with my kids, my spouse, my family, I like to call it a family, because sometimes it's not just your children, it's the extended family. And, depending on the context, it can really include friends, neighbors, people we love. I mean, it's all the people that we think of. And if you want to get really broad, if you feel more of a connection to humanity in general, then your role can be even bigger. We make our role big or small. We see a child on the street, we can decide that they need support, and we step into a role that a parent would step into. True. As somebody who cares about kids. I would never walk past a lost child. Would you?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely not.
Right. I mean, that's where, I've held kids' hands in movie theaters, Broadway shows. I mean, Target, Safeway. I mean, they get lost.
They get lost everywhere. Yeah.
Scared. And I'd rather be the one holding their hand, because I will wait with them until that parent arrives. So I think that's probably across the board. I'd say almost everybody would do the same thing.
I would like to think so. Yeah.
I'd like to think so. So the intention part is, I guess we can be intentional in that when we experience distance or breakdown or a hurt feeling, either ours or one of our children or spouse or any of the extended, that we do something about it, that we don't just let it fester. Rupture and repair is the nature of relationship. Mm-hmm. And the best relationships are where each party takes equal responsibility for the closeness and the distance. So kind of like, let's use those two to anchor us. So rupture and repair are the nature. It's going to happen. There are always going to be breakdowns. Mm-hmm. trying to think that there won't be is really like putting yourself in an impossible situation. So with that comes an acceptance of, yeah, it's going to be part of my job to handle the repair part,
Hmm.
and to also be open to somebody else coming to me when they feel like they want to repair.
Hmm.
So how do I handle that? And am I also present to the fact that there's probably a blind side that I'm not aware of? We call it the dark side, right? The
Hmm.
shadow, the aspect of my interactions and how I show up that I'm not really that clear about. But I see it around the edges when I get a nasty response or something. And I can either look at it as, well, there's something wrong with that person, or how is our dance?
Hmm.
What kind of dance are we in that this is part of what's going on in our relationship? And that allows for there to be kind of the no shame, no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame. I mean, if we have that no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame mindset, then we just have things that arise that we handle,
Hmm.
as opposed to trying to find the culprit and make somebody wrong or bad or land in the godforsaken land of blame, victim blame consciousness. So there are a lot of minefields out there. And if we're intentional about being present, I guess that would be it.
Hmm.
Really being present, embodied, conscious, then we're going to have a much better chance of coming out and through all of the things that are going to be happening throughout our lifetime with all of our relationships in ways that we feel proud of.
Sure. No, absolutely, and that makes complete sense. I can almost hear the first email towards me being typed up saying, "Oh, but Pete, it sounds exhausting, right? It's so much easier to just drift through life, and what you're
Mm.
talking about requires a lot more effort than people sometimes not want to put in, um, but feel like they're able to put in. Let me put it that way."
So astute. I do hear that,
Hmm.
God, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say, there's there's I know if we are using, the lazy man's guide to parenting, if you will, or
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
what that's going to mean in that lazy man's guide is that I just deal with things on a surface level
Yeah.
and they never really get resolved.
Hmm.
So while it may look like it didn't take me long to deal with it by really not dealing with it,
Hmm.
it never went away. And I'm going to be really not dealing with it over and over and over and over again. So when we come down to the mathematical
Yeah.
analysis, I'm not really sure that it is longer, because
Yeah.
you end up never getting out of the loop because you never resolve the resentment
Mm.
or never really deal with the actual problem. I mean, in my world, we talk about the presenting problem is not the problem, it's the symptom.
Hmm.
And you live at the land of just presenting problems as if they're really the issue to deal with,
Yeah.
rather than the surface.
Mm.
And they're what arises from the deeper problem, the wound, if you want to call it, or the hurt, or the schism, or whatever is creating that thing on the surface.
Mm.
If you're only
Yeah.
going to deal with this stuff and you're going to do it through rewards and punishments, then you're going to activate the secondary problems, retaliation, rebellion, and resistance.
Hmm.
And that is a whole nother land. And 75% of behavioral disruptions actually are over in this land over here. They are so far away from the underlying original unmet need.
Hmm.
So we just kind of go, God, who'd want to do that? That sounds exhausting.
Mm.
It really is. In fact, that potentially you're going to be dealing with things at the core, and it may take a bit longer because you haven't ever done it
Yeah.
and you're clearing a lot.
Hmm.
But once you've done that, there's so much goodwill and everybody is operating at such a clean level that really problems are dealt with so fast, so easily, because there's no resentment flow. I think that's the case. I really
Yeah.
do.
No, it sounds to me like a classic case of, you put the effort in now, so you don't have to put more effort in later on, as in the way that it is with almost everything in life. Everything in
I
life, to
agree.
be honest, right? It's when you're looking at for
Is that
various.
shortcut really that short?
Yes, it is usually that. It is most of the problems that at least the way I see it, the most of the problems that I see in the world, especially in, let's say, the world of politics, is usually because oh, we're just gonna kick that into the long grass and just deal with the superficial stuff, right? We're going
Now you're
to
just opening up a whole new can of worms. You know that. Like,
yeah, I'm afraid,
now I'm just like bursting at the seams to talk about short-sightedness in political, arenas where there's almost an amnesia that goes on
yeah.
around the cost that we pay for short-term, okay, let's lower interest rates, even though we have inflation in our economy.
Mhm.
Mr.
Yeah,
Economist.
yeah,
Yeah, great.
exactly.
Sure, you're going to fuel a boom
Yeah,
and maybe it'll get you reelected. But beyond that,
yeah.
there's
What are
going to
we
be a
doing?
cost that the whole society pays for your having ignored the fact that it's also your responsibility to talk about, we can do this. It'll be great for everybody in the short run, but you do know
But yeah,
that you have to pay the piper.
yeah, which is
There's no
we
way
see
around
with
it.
which is what we see with a lot of things, and I think a lot of listeners can relate to that. And I think a lot of that. I always say that your job as a parent is basically to put as capable an adult into the world as you can, right?
Yeah.
So basically, just gone. Your job isn't necessarily and just to get your 5-year-old to go to bed quietly,
Yeah.
right? It's the job is to have an 18 or 21-year-old or whatever, 26-year-old, 30-year-old that isn't completely out of their mind with
Yeah.
trauma and all that sort of stuff
I mean,
because
it's
they
so
used to get
true.
shouted at for going to bed.
Yeah. So we have like the behavioralist perspective. And a behavioralist is really focused on behavior. I'm not a behavioralist. I'm much more in your camp,
Yeah,
where it's not really about like, of course I want you to go to bed.
sure.
Who doesn't, right?
Please, yeah.
And we all want you to go to bed. We want you to pack your own lunch in the morning. We want you to put your shoes on, brush your teeth, make your bed, all the stuff,
Yeah.
all the stuff that's going to make you a good spouse,
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to actually support you later in life because you're going to know how to take care of the world that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have a value around, being a good roommate or prospective, partner in life,
Yeah.
because you're not acting as though you're alone,
Mm-hmm.
that there are other people that live here too. And so, yes, but a behavioralist is looking for obedience and compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you might be looking for consideration and
Yes.
develop the behavior changes, not because of what's going to happen to you if you don't, which is, the foundation of behavioralism and, rewards and punishments, external locus of causality, which means that people change the worldview is that people then who use that system believe that the reason people change their behavior is because what's going to happen to them if they don't. So the foundation is fear and dependence.
Yeah,
you have to be dependent on me for the goodie. So you learn sort of like learned helplessness, as well as you have to be afraid of me that I can just wield my power and take stuff away. So you got to realize that that's going to impact your relationship.
Of course.
And it's also robbing someone of agency, responsibility, autonomy, that they learn not because they're afraid, but because you take the extra time to cultivate values. And one of them is the value of consideration. And included and embedded in that is not just the consideration of the people and the powers that be to do as they're told, but also the consideration of, but hold on, regardless of my age, because I believe there is ageism and I feel like I'm a child advocate and that I spend my life trying to raise people's awareness that if you're talking to this person that way, who's significantly younger than you, in that tone, with that directive, it is as though they are marginalized in your mindset, that there should just be doing as they're told. Rather than you'd like to have cooperation, but you also want to take into consideration that their resistance is a no to you and a yes to something inside themselves.
Mhm.
So fine, what are they saying yes to? Help me understand what's behind this. I mean, people are generally cooperative and they actually do want to please. It's kind of
Mhm.
built into our survival mechanism that we are not, obstreperous just out of like being nasty. But there's
Yeah.
something that goes on in these dynamics that give rise to cooperation or rise to resistance.
Mhm.
I'm more interested in what's going on in the dynamic.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because the behaviorist approach, it's yeah, that works a treat on my dogs, right? That's amazing. I mean, I'm all for positive, but behavior, but that is dog training. That is, like you said, that's looking for obedience. That's looking for
Our children
to
are smarter than dogs.
well,
Ah,
you, you know, but
Peter.
we hope that they turn into adults that are smarter than dogs, and even that's not necessarily a given these days. But it is, I think it's interesting what you said. I did a conversation with someone a long time ago, and I'm going to have to look this up, about value-led living, right?
Yeah.
So and what you were talking about, you're trying to raise people who have values.
Yeah.
Um, but as they were pointing out, a lot of people say they have values such as consideration and all that sort of stuff, but they don't act in accordance with their values because they've never really been taught how to,
Mm, I would
or,
agree
they-
with that.
or they've never been given the opportunity.
You
They've
know,
never been shown.
exactly. It's also, you know, when you value yourself as a child
Mhm.
and are holding your ground because you have something in you that you treasure that is somehow being jeopardized through the
Mhm.
conversation with an older person and an adult, and the ageism sets in.
Yeah.
And I had a daughter, my daughter, who would say to me as a very little girl, Mommy, she would never have spoken to you that way.
Mhm.
So she was so attuned to tone of voice,
Mhm.
facial expressions, body language, as
Yeah.
was my son. He said, Mom, she was saying yes. Her teacher, was saying yes about something. He said, but everything about her was saying no. So he could pick up on
Yeah.
this lie, if we're going to call it a
Mhm.
lie, where people say one thing, but they mean another.
Mhm.
And, I think kids are like savants in the land of picking up on that
Yeah.
double talk. So they pick up on it and they're really confused at that stage. Even as adults, I'm sure you have
Mhm.
experienced this. You're like, well, I know what your words are saying, but I know everything about you is saying something different. So
Yeah.
you're not congruent. Now I can choose which one I'm going to respond to, but the intentional person will respond to what's really being communicated. And they will not play the game of responding to what they know is not the truth, but is for whatever reason being presented because
Mhm.
that person is fine. I mean, we've all heard that.
Yeah.
Okay, clearly you're
Yeah.
not fine.
Yeah.
Whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like,
Yeah.
come on, it's not that hard for us to figure out that these are not really the truth,
Yeah.
that they are saying to somebody out of exasperation, I can't talk to you anymore. You're not listening to my
Mhm.
side. So that ability to be able to include the other person, regardless of their age, means that we have to become conscious of the fact that we have an irrational, unconscious negative belief about children, their
Mhm.
value, their worth, and their ability and or space to speak for themselves. We call it disrespectful. We
Mhm.
all probably have it in the back of our mind. How
Yeah.
dare you talk back to me?
Yeah. It
Right?
it
There's
it
something about you're supposed to not speak up.
mhm.
You're not allowed to talk. You're just supposed to do as you're told. Anything other than that is disrespectful and go to your room.
Yeah,
And
I've
maybe
got
on the time, you'll get spanked for it.
yeah, it's funny. I have a lot of clients with kids that are, I'd say, a little bit older, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. So they're into that, becoming a
Yeah,
young adult. And I say I tend to talk like most kids, and I've worked with some kids, some little athletes and all that type of stuff. I talk to them as if they are adults, right? These guys are essentially, when I worked with them, they're my clients. So, you're the boss. I
sure.
always point out to them, you're the boss. That's the power dynamic here. So that means but it's quite funny that when you sit around the table with their parents and the child there, and you're just having a casual conversation with everybody, and everybody is having a bit of a joke and a laugh, and then the kid says something back which is on the same level as the adults have been saying. All of a sudden, the parents will say, "Hey, you can't talk to adults like that." Do you
Exactly.
know what I'm saying? And I'm like, we were having a conversation with each other. What he
Yep.
said or what she said is completely fine within the context of what was going on.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we pull
Yep.
the but he's an adult card.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
which is a weird, and don't get me wrong, my generation, as I always point out, middle-aged white guy, right? My generation was very much, I am the problem, right? But middle-aged white guys are of my era. We were raised in that way, right? You
Yeah,
sat at the kiddie table. I'm not sure
absolutely.
they still do these things, but we sat at the kids' table at the family functions, and by the time you were old enough, I'm not quite sure what age that was, you got moved up.
Yeah, I know. I mean, children are to be seen and not heard.
That type of
It's
stuff,
it's
yeah.
as old as the ages, and it's passed down through the ages.
Mhm.
It's here now. We
Yeah,
lived in Hong Kong for 35 years. So
right.
most of the coaching practice I've run has been in the parent communities in Hong Kong,
Mhm.
which is a huge mix internationally.
Yeah.
A lot of Asians, of
Mhm.
course, everything from Japanese, Korean, obviously Chinese,
Yeah.
but lots of British,
Mhm.
plenty of Americans, and a smattering of Europeans as well.
Yeah.
So it's really a pretty good cross section of the
Mhm.
world. And what I found is that, to my surprise, almost, and I think everybody is always surprised, that this is not an American, a German, that this is
Yeah.
a universal mindset around children
Mhm.
and their place in society. I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting. I speak to so many people on so many podcasts and so
Yeah.
many hosts from, different cultural backgrounds.
Mhm.
And I would say that there are certain pockets where it's more, I mean, it's very strong.
Yeah.
Filial piety in the Asian context
Mhm.
is very much about respect your elders, which the word is being used in a way that I believe is a distortion.
Mhm.
Respect does not mean don't have a voice.
Yeah.
It does not mean you have to subjugate yourself and essentially betray yourself in service to
Mhm.
elder in the room.
Yeah.
At what point do we recognize the danger of teaching children not to speak up for themselves? I mean, it's at the
Mhm.
core, of course, of all child sexual abuse.
Oh, yes,
At
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
absolute core is that you
Yeah.
have someone who's learned to be obedient and compliant to whoever has the most power in the room.
Mhm.
And that is usually going to be an adult. It could be a very powerful peer or someone in their age group. Absolutely.
Sure.
And you see that on the playground where, Lord of the Flies, like,
Yeah.
power is there. And you've got a group of kids who are all the same age, but that doesn't mean they all have the same power.
Oh, for sure. No, absolutely. Everybody knows that clique, right? Every group has a
Everybody knows
leader, so
there's
so to
the
speak.
cool group, and they're usually the cruel group as well,
Yeah.
because in order to have that status, they
Mhm.
have to eliminate a lot of people
Yeah.
and create somehow, something about them that everybody wants to be a part of. Right. I don't know how to
Yeah.
be a part of that group. I've heard so
Mhm.
many kids say that. And I mean, really, it's like, well, why would you want to? Oh my God. They're
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. There's nothing pleasant, but when you're, I suppose when you're younger, and even when you're, let's call it an immature adult, right? So someone who
it,
has never really turned
it
into,
doesn't
we
change
still
that
want
much.
to be, we will still want to be part of that. I mean, half of the
Part of the cool
Instagram,
group.
TikTok manosphere is based in that alpha male nonsense
It
world
is.
of, if you're not XYZ, then you are less than, right? That is
And
kind
here's
of
the
what.
other side of that, that alpha male group, if we're going to go with that for a minute, is
Mhm.
also the one that I would say, generally speaking, has a very strong dominant hand father knows best
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right? Wait till your father gets home. I mean,
yeah.
even women will use it, right? And
Yeah.
that's where it's everybody's complicit in this. It's not like men are alone. It's like women are also complicit. Wait till your father gets home. I mean, how many people grew up with that? I
Hmm.
did,
Yeah.
and it was like there was a fear of what dad would do when he heard about your great transgression,
Hmm.
and like what would be the response. And then it gets into the land of, well, they did such and such. And, mom could say things like, and they made me feel so hurt.
Hmm.
And then, how dare you hurt your mother? Right. And then but it's a lie. Nobody makes me feel anything. And if
Hmm.
we're stuck in victim blame consciousness, and we give our power to our kids and other people to
Yeah.
make us feel, and then we blame them on how we feel because it's as though they caused it when we know that's not possible,
Hmm.
the whole thing is a cesspool.
Yeah. It sounds that it's a recipe for disaster, really, when you think you think
It
about it, when you
is.
put it like that. So how do we? Okay, so assuming every parent has their own shit to deal with, right? That is a
Yeah.
given, and we have to deal with that stuff, and need a bit of therapy or whatever you need to do. Just work on it.
Yep.
Ideally, before you have
Or be
kids,
good.
as we've had conversations on this podcast before, part of your prenatal, antenatal prep should really be getting some therapy to work some stuff out, so that when the baby comes,
Totally agree.
you don't have that mess hanging there. However, having said that, we all have stuff to work on, right? How do you teach your kids? Because what you're talking about is essentially children that are respectfully setting boundaries, right? Or even disrespectfully setting boundaries, maybe. But how do we, as parents, make sure that we not only listen to their boundaries and to some point appreciate that they have them and raise kids that know how to set boundaries and all that sort of stuff, again, healthy adults, but also that there is still a level of cooperation rather than compliance when it comes to things that just kind of need done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would say that the the key is to create an ecosystem in
Hmm.
our families where the most important thing is connection, and that trumps my need to correct you, trumps my need to tell you what you did wrong.
Hmm.
It trumps everything. So that if that is like the main thing, then we focus on, where's our breakdown,
Hmm.
what's going on here, that you're feeling so wronged by me that this doesn't feel like a request anymore, it feels like I'm demanding.
Hmm.
That my sense of what's going on here is that we're creating more and more distance, and I believe that happens when we don't see each other. So I want you to feel so seen, heard, and understood by me,
Hmm.
that what actually happens is it's reciprocal. Then of course the child wants to see, hear, and understand you just in the same way. So
Hmm.
it's ebb and flow of reconnecting, breakdown, like rupture and repair, like we talked
Yeah.
about earlier, where each party is taking equal responsibility for the closeness and the distance. And I just feel like that's such sage advice. I heard it from someone, I repeat it all the time,
Hmm.
where I think about, and I'm actually, as I'm talking to you, I'm scanning my relationships, and I'm thinking about, like, where is the other party taking all the responsibility for the closeness,
Hmm.
or taking all the responsibility for the distance? And how do I, with my intention, step into the role of the adult, because we kind of get to keep that role throughout our lives,
Yeah.
and have an action, a reconnection that moves past the current conversation. So it really
Hmm.
does take us out of the blame game world,
Yeah.
where I'm sure everybody has their side, and would love to talk about it ad nauseum, but it doesn't get us anywhere.
Hmm.
Although I do think there's a right amount of conversation that does need to happen. You can't just sweep it under the carpet. They, in a lot of spiritual communities, we talk about a spiritual bypass, and that's
Hmm.
essentially what we're talking about if we don't actually address it. is that we just pretend that it didn't matter when it did matter.
Yeah.
It was a silly, silly thing, but it mattered. And no matter how small it was big to someone. And so I think it's just about that mindset. I hope I've answered your question. I feel like I've been rambling, but it's that kind of a way of looking at things.
Yeah, no, you definitely did, because that's a good point. But because it's something you said earlier on about the thing you're angry about isn't actually the thing you're angry about, right? And we see that a lot. And I will throw a crappy television reference out now because that's what I do. If anybody's watched Ted Lasso,
I love
right?
it.
And everybody kind of has watched Ted Lasso by now. There's no spoilers in here. One of the final I think it's the last season, where one of the coaches goes up to one of the players it's a football thing, right? A football comedy. And he says, listen, I'm not sure what you're upset about, but the thing you're upset about is not the thing you're upset about. And you need to work on that. Because that is such an open, I don't know about you. Obviously, this is a field you work in, but no one ever said that to me. Because the thing I'm upset about, middle-aged white guy, is the thing I'm upset about. Do you know what I mean? As in, that was how I was
that.
raised. That's how I was raised. When my dad was upset at me leaving the lights on, he was upset at me leaving the lights on.
Yeah.
And no matter how many hours he would sit down with you, he would never be able to say, well, actually,
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
he just held on to that.
You know, my dad, when we would come back to the US in the summertime, when the kids were on summer break, come back to my parents' house. And my dad at the time he was an older dad. So he was born in 1915, and I was the last of 5 children after, 3 marriages. So, you can imagine ours was a his, mine, and ours family with all kinds of stuff happening. And, I could go on for hours, but we all had a different dad, actually. So all 5 of us had a different father because I was the last. I had the best.
Yeah.
I had the best guy because he'd made tons of mistakes, but not so much on me. I think for me, he just showered me with love and taught me that he loved me warts and all. And I grew up feeling lovable. And it was a gift he gave me.
Yeah.
But when my daughter, I left them, I came back, I said, hey, would you watch after her while I run to the grocery store? Sure, honey. And so I came back, I wasn't gone long. And I said, well, where is she? Oh, I sent her to her room. Why? She'd never been sent to her room. Why? She was disrespectful to her grandpa. I was like, oh no, Dad, what happened? Well, I told her it was time to come join me for lunch, and she ignored me, and she's not going to disrespect her grandpa. I said, wow, whoa. Well, let me go find her. And I went into the room. I found her. She's in floods of tears. She doesn't know what's going on. I mean, she's literally never had this kind of an interaction before. And I said, I can see you're so upset. What happened? And she said, I was finishing my drawing, Mommy. And I was almost ready. And Grandpa just started yelling at me about being disrespectful and that I was disrespecting him. And I don't even know what he's talking about. And it was literally 2 ships passing in the night. There was nothing in her beingness that disrespected her grandpa. She was finishing she was playing with crayons and finishing her drawing. So I went upstairs. I said, well, let's go upstairs and talk with Grandpa. And so we came upstairs and we sat down, and I said, Dad, I just spoke to Pia, and this is what she said about the interaction. And I shared that with him. And I told her, and your grandpa was, this is, like you thought, this is where he's coming from. And I said, I feel like the 2 of you have just been 2 ships passing in the night. Like there's a complete breakdown in communication here. And I hope we can repair this because it's an important relationship. And I hate to see this fester. And I got up and left. And, they each went their own direction. And I think both of them felt, somewhat heard, somewhat seen, somewhat understood, and somewhat revealed about what was going on. And, I swear my dad must have been, I can't remember. He was probably in his late 80s at the time. And he came back to me later, hours later, and he said to me, honey, it's a better way.
Hmm.
So I just look at that, where you're looking at that average white guy in his 80s who's able to take it in and digest it and say, I think it's a better way. And I love that. It's one of my best memories of my dad. So, this somewhat bad story about their interaction. And yet I look at it and I think that was it. That was a hero's journey.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's one of those that it shows that if you take the time to quietly engage with all parties, and not everybody has an outsider has a third party there, right? And as I think as a parent, quite often you have to be that person because your child isn't necessarily
I so agree. And it
at
would
that
help
stage.
so much to have a neutral party. And I mean, it was great
Yeah.
that I wasn't triggered. It was great that I could sit with each one of them without shaming or blaming or
Hmm.
making somebody feel wronged or bad, just pointing it out as we got a breakdown here.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's two ships passing in the night, and let everybody come to their own conclusion about reflecting on it. It's easier to do when there's no shame in the room, by the way. It's a lot
Yeah.
easier when you have that big sign up in your house that says, if you're not making a mistake, you're not growing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you accept that mistakes are going to happen and that there's going to be generational mindsets,
Hmm.
it's a quagmire. We walk into a room, all of us, and we're dragging along with us generations of mindsets, generations of viewpoints,
Yeah.
generations of harm and pain and trauma.
Hmm.
We're not
Yeah.
just showing up like this. It's not just
So
me.
much baggage. No,
Getting
you're
all the
quite right. Yeah.
generations that came before me. And yes, I think I've purged a lot of it
Hmm.
through a variety of different ways to heal, and ultimately getting to the place where we realize that everybody's doing the best they can,
Yeah.
even though it might be absolutely abominable.
Yeah.
What they have.
It's a funny one. It's the coming to the realization that even people who were not great but doing their best in the moment can be quite eye-opening for I think, especially again, not necessarily for kids, but for adults and people who are about to be parents, maybe people who have been parents for a while, even people who aren't parents, just realizing that everybody is kind of just figuring stuff out and dealing with it
It's true.
as best they can.
And that we also have a responsibility where harm is being done to stop it.
Sure, of course.
And, to be able to say, I understand it may have been acceptable when you were growing up, but this is not okay now. And,
Yeah.
and you will not allow you to speak to each other this way. And I've done that. I've done that with my father-in-law, speaking to the kids in a way that was not acceptable. And I just said, get up, leave the room. I'm going to talk to grandpa, and I'm going to let him know that we don't do this anymore.
Yeah.
We don't speak to each other in this way. We don't shame people. It's not okay. So both are true. I can understand contextually where he was, my dad was, I mean, both very, very, old white guys, who we understand that was the dominant culture. That was the culture they grew up in. Mistakes were not acceptable, actually. And there really was a sense and a belief and a culture that supported that the dominant culture could do whatever it wanted to children.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very, very much so.
Around the world.
Yeah. Well, because that is a funny thing, right? Because again, you mentioned that earlier about seeing so many different cultures, and I know we're about to wrap up, but it's an interesting because I can again almost hear an email being typed saying that this is this is the patriarchy, right? And I'm not saying they're wrong. Right? The patriarchy has a lot to answer for. It's a very patriarchal way. It's a very patriarchal way of dealing with kids, right? It's as one of my clients pointed out, she thoroughly dislikes child-free holidays, as as principle, not going without children, but banning children from places where children would usually be. She said, because it implies that thing that we were talking about earlier. There's a kids table.
Yeah.
The kids should not be here.
Yeah.
You're not treating the kids like little adults that need to learn to function in a society. You just go, these little jackasses, I don't want to see them until they're 18 years old. And then we expect them to be fully formed adults at the age of 18.
Yeah.
As in, they've had no experience of dealing with any of that stuff. And then we put them in that situation and now behave.
Yeah.
That can't be the healthiest way to do it.
It's certainly not. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Alice Miller in the drama The Gifted Child.
I've heard of it, yes.
So it was one of her seminal works. I mean, I'm a big Alice Miller fan, and I loved how much she saw through ageism. Mm-hmm. And she spoke about, with, for example, just one thing that we usually focus on in parenting is this idea of sharing. And sharing, she said, that it's one thing for it to come and emerge from within a child. Mm-hmm. That if you wait, it's kind of like reading, in so many things. I know in Europe, they don't teach reading until much later. And that it takes like an afternoon and they all know how to read. Because when you wait until the apple's ripe and ready to fall from the tree, it's not hard work. Yeah. They're ready. They've heard the phonics. They've been exposed to it. I mean, all the things. Mm-hmm. So that literally it's that easy. Well, in the States and maybe other places, they start years before. Mm-hmm. And it's not that they can't get them there. Some of them faster, some of them, by God, it takes a long time because the apple wasn't anywhere near ripe and it wasn't ready to fall from the tree, but we could force it. Yeah. So she said it's kind of like that with sharing. It is actually developmentally normal that a child will get to a place where they want to actually share their goodies with the people around them. Yeah. But we tend to want that to happen years before it's developmentally emerging. Mm-hmm. So we can, in fact, just like reading, teach them how to do it like you teach someone how to ride a bike, like a skill. Mm-hmm. And they can learn it as a part of being socialized into society with the right set of skills to be able to probably succeed in social circles in better ways than kids who don't learn the skill. Yeah. Almost everyone will learn it anyway. They will actually learn it not because you teach it to them, but because it was coming. Just like they will learn how to, they'll potty train themselves if you give them the right amount of time. Nobody has to teach them how to do that. They'll sleep through the night naturally. Yeah. I mean, almost everything that we do or consider a developmental milestone is that it will happen about this time. Yeah, and we then get in and try to have all those things happen years beforehand. And we, by God, can make it happen because somewhere in our mind, we puff ourselves up and say, well, our kid's smarter or our kid's better. Because look at, they're doing that developmental milestone in earlier on. Yes, no, absolutely. When what is developmentally normal is actually a spectrum. And somebody earlier on or later in the spectrum is still normal. And there isn't like a weightedness about when you hit that spectrum, you're better or worse. But in society, tend to create that. So it's kind of another way of looking at the same thing that you're talking about, is that we can allow things to emerge. And it's so much easier trying to force the issue. And sharing is a good example. Point.
That is a really, really good point. On that happy note, because I think that's a great ending. I don't think we can necessarily top that, to be honest.
But boom.
We've covered, that absolutely, buzzer beater level sort of thing. That was amazing. So on that happy note, I will press stop record here. And as you know, press stop record is exactly what I did, because these are my dulcet tones again. Thanks very much to Katherine for coming on. I love it when busy people who are experts in their field take the time to come on to my to my little podcast, right? Obviously, I will link to absolutely everything in the podcast description. Well, you will find a link to like Conscious Parenting Revolution, Catherine's website, and all that type of stuff. There's a ton of stuff on there. There's tons of with a couple of ebooks, 7 strategies to keep your relationship from your kids from hitting the boiling point. There's a webinar on there about video gaming. There's just a ton of good information and courses and courses on there. And I think, this is a sort of stuff, like I said, I talk about this a lot. This is a sort of stuff we need to be investing in. Right? I would argue this is more important than a postpartum exercise program that you have to pay a couple of $100 for. Right, says the guy with a postpartum exercise program. Anyways, that's me done for another week. Peter at healthypostnatalbody.com. If you have any questions, any comments, would like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone, you would like to hear from someone, I don't mind inviting people. You can email, you can text, you can do all these sort of fun things. Right? You have a tremendous week, and I, my friends, will be back next week with a From the Vault episode. Right? You take care. Bye now.